Hey everyone, welcome back to the Revenue Engine Master podcast. My name is Elio Narciso, co-founder and CEO of Scalestack, and this is where we usually go deep into what salespeople, teams, and revenue engine in general care about, and also a little bit about how we can make the system around sales a little bit better, and marketing, of course. Today, I'm joined by someone who is very interesting and who's sort of redefining the way we talk about B2B sales and AI. Maybe you've seen her TikToks calling out the mess that it is today in most people's CRMs, or maybe you've seen her in action breaking down sales ops with a clarity that it's really hard to find. It's very fresh to me. And McKenah Elizabeth is a sales professional turned creator who has a huge following. Congrats on that, McKenah. Over 135,000 followers on TikTok. How many on LinkedIn?
15,000.
15,000. And by being really honest, brutally honest almost, about what's broken in sales and in tech sales particularly, and maybe what's possible when you build better. McKenah, welcome to the Revenue Engine Master podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Usually we go over a few interesting topics, but I'm very interested in how you started from the very beginning of this content adventure, which to me is almost there was a moment where maybe, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you thought someone needs to say this stuff out loud. Is that what happened, or is the story different? It was by accident. So I'm interested about how did you start this content side of your job?
Yeah, absolutely. So like every salesperson that's upset about not having enough leads, it's always marketing's fault. And so if you don't have marketing, or marketing isn't doing a great job, you might think to yourself, how can I take on this initiative? How can I use content to generate leads for myself, create more awareness about our services, what I'm selling? And so about 4 or 5 years ago, I was working for a small company, didn't have a marketing department. It was all cold calling and grind and wine and dine type of sales. And I was just trying to think outside the box. How can I be more in front of my prospects and customers all the time so that I'm top of mind whenever they have a project or a need coming up because I was selling consulting services and staffing. So I really just started using TikTok to create and edit videos for free to then post on LinkedIn. So I was using it as an editing tool, kind of.
Oh, I see.
And then started creating content and posting in both places. And then, started getting on meetings, and my prospects would be like, hey, we saw your video, or we saw this, or, and so I was like, oh, it's working. I'm in front of them. My face is in front of them. And so I just continued to do it, and then started talking about my journey into tech sales and how I got there, and started kind of sharing more about the career path in general of getting into tech and working in tech and the different jobs at tech companies. Because my degree is in elementary education, I thought I was going to be a second grade teacher. And so I still love to teach and love to educate, and creating content is a way of doing that, kind of like an outlet for me. But I also wanted to help people that maybe had a very small view of what career opportunities were out there in the world, and they just didn't know what opportunities were there.
I love it. So in doing this, you then started talking about sales in general, right? So what did you think was interesting for customers? The customers that maybe were coming to you through the videos and the TikToks. Why do you think that they started looking at these videos and say, let me take a call with McKenna?
Yeah. Well, the great thing about sales is that it touches every single industry. So I found people from real estate and mortgage industries and car sales and tech, a bunch of different people in sales following my content. And so it gave me a very broad audience to speak to. And it also allowed me to collect feedback and comments from people out in other sales industries that weren't really aware of like how are people doing it in B2B sales, or what's working for people. And so that's really why I honed in on sales, and I focused a lot on like soft skills and like psychology of sales, and then started getting a lot of requests for me to review different tools that would automate the process or help people find phone numbers or data. And so then I really kind of shifted into what systems and tools and software can you use in sales to be the most efficient at your job.
I love it. And so TikTok, you said like it was more of an editing tool at the beginning, but then like the audience, like became much bigger there. How do you explain that? Like was, because you were like one of the first voices like talking about this stuff on TikTok, or how do you explain the huge following there?
Yeah, so one of the ways that you grow on TikTok and why it's easier to grow faster there than any other platform is because the algorithm suggests a lot of your content to new people who have never seen it before that are watching other sales content or other content similar to yours. And so it auto-recommends, but also the more people share your video, the more people comment, the faster you grow because it pushes it out to more people. And so I found like videos of mine going viral because people would share it with their team or share it with their boss or somebody else in the sales industry, and so the video just kept continuing to gain traction. Even still to this day, I go on my analytics and I have videos from last year that people are still going through and liking, all because they're finding it on their algorithm, or they're searching how to cold call, or they're searching best CRM, and my videos will pop up. They're using it as a search engine, and that allows my content to continue to be in front of people years later.
That's cool. We are not on TikTok. Maybe we should.
Maybe. I don't know. It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody. Yeah, I think it's not for everybody for sure.
Yeah.
And also, like, what's the length of content?
Couple minutes long.
Minutes stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a formula that you use, or like depending on the content and stuff, or it's just like, at least 2 minutes and then whatever makes sense for that content?
The formula that I use is I start most of my videos with if you're in sales. I make it about the other person. So many people try to start and they're like, hi, blah, blah, blah.
Today I am.
And they're like, today I am. Or they're like, hi, so I know I haven't been on here in a while. And I'm like, shut up. Don't make it about you. The first thing you should say is making it about them. Like, if you are in sales, this is what you might find helpful. This is what you might be experiencing, and just making it all about the other person and just trying to provide value to the person in front of you and not talking about yourself. And so that's how I hook everything if you're in sales, and then go right into it and then deliver value and then kind of wrap it up and trying to make it very, very concise in what I'm saying. So that's generally my formula. And then also constantly changing angles, because you can't just stand in front of the camera in one take. You have to be, because people attention spans, so you're like 2 seconds and 3 seconds, and your background constantly has to be shifting because otherwise people get bored. So you have
so then you stop and start again, and recording and stop and start again.
I just press the button and I let go, and I press the button and I let go, so it'll stop.
See, I never recorded on TikTok, so I don't even know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll now check it out then. I did watch your videos on TikTok, and I thought it was great, and I love what you said about the audience. I mean, I read this book a few years ago that it's called Resonate, and is the woman that put together the slides for Al Gore's deck talking about the environment. I don't know, this was a few years ago.
Okay.
And she talks about make the audience the hero. It's always about the audience. If you want to tell a story, you need to talk to the audience and make them the hero of the story in many ways. So I love what you said at the beginning, which is if you are in sales. So if you guys are in sales, one thing that we see, and McKenna and I have shared this offline very often, is the disconnect between salespeople and a lot of the tools that they are almost forced to use. And I think CRMs are the biggest offenders. And it seems that you share that view. Why do you think, maybe let me start with this. Why do you think we have so many great consumer apps like TikTok? And so as consumers, we use these great software tools that just work.
Yeah.
And instead, in business, we don't have the same level of quality, it seems. Have you thought about that? And if so, like, what do you think is the reason?
That's a really great point. I think, maybe it's harder for companies to pivot once they have 100,000 users or 500,000 people using their platform every day, and they can't afford for something to break, and so they just don't change it. But I don't think that's going to work for the next generation. I think if it looks like crap, people are going to think it's crap. And, if it's not functional and if it's not an efficient software to use, eventually it will lose market share to those that are. And I could name some examples, but I don't want to get myself blackballed from the top CRM and ERP companies. But, they could be better, and user experience could certainly improve. I don't know why we're not doing it. Why do you think? Why don't they update it?
Well, first of all, I think that when you join a company, you are told the tools that you have to use. And I think we kind of go along with whatever is there. Like it's rare, like you join a company and say, oh, this tool is terrible. I'll use my own tool. I mean, eventually, like, once you stay at that company, we have seen salespeople doing just that. They're like, they've been tolerating like, poor, like clunky tools for a long time. And then they say, I'll go my own way and use like, other tools, other like, platforms versus the ones that the company provides. I've seen salespeople buying with their own credit cards tools that the company doesn't provide. So I think one problem is that like, you are told to use certain tools and you just go along with it. The other is that I think like our tolerance in general in business is higher, and we have to go through the motions and do our job, and so there are certain things that we maybe don't even think about. But I think in the age of AI, you and I both are working like in AI for sales and for salespeople and marketing. AI is changing everything, I think. And like, it's completely radically changing the perspective about like, what is like a good workflow? What is a good tool? And if you think like OpenAI, what you can access with just a chat, like it's pretty incredible, no? And so I think that that's changing the expectations everywhere. But it's a very interesting question to me because, like Twitter, TikTok, and, Airbnb, beautifully designed Airbnb. And like, I just booked my hotel on Hotel Tonight. They just work. Everything is so intuitive and, I don't need any enablement to use them.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe it's really the bigger issue is that companies, the migration to migrate to something else once you're in so deep is so hard and time consuming of a project that no one wants to tackle it. And with consumers, it's like, well, I'll just cancel my subscription. Or I'll just leave. I'll go,
exactly.
It's too easy to cancel. And so you have to innovate.
And so what do you think? So first of all, like you use a CRM and like, one of my like surprises in using these CRMs is that like they can do in theory a million things. But at the end of the day, like salespeople use them only for like a very small subset of all of the features. And so I'm curious about like, what do you use the CRM the most and what would you like that the CRM did for you and that doesn't? Or does poorly?
Yeah, so the two CRMs that I'm most familiar with are the top two in the market, which would be Salesforce and HubSpot. I made a lot of videos about this. I've used Salesforce for a majority of my career, and then this past year, I've had the opportunity to use HubSpot. And wow, did that open my eyes to what I was missing as a salesperson. And I can't even tell you how much more productive I am. And it's for a couple of reasons. One is I am able to easily create a call task for myself, or I'm easily able to pull reports. I can launch sequences myself. I can like build out all kinds of stuff that allows me to manage my pipeline and stay on top of all my deals, and I can do it so quickly and so easily. And I've tried to do all these things in Salesforce, and it is dang near impossible. It's not. So you have to do everything manually. And so obviously when you do everything manually or you do things inefficiently, you lose time. It's time you're not spending selling. So HubSpot has, I mean, I could go on and on about how much HubSpot has changed my life as a salesperson. If you don't, and I've said this before, like not everybody can afford to move to HubSpot. If you're an enterprise company, you usually are on Salesforce because the reporting at scale is better there. But you should at least have SalesLoft or Outreach sitting on top of it that will give you that same functionality that I'm getting in HubSpot with task management and sequencing and the ability to see when somebody's on your website. SalesLoft has an AI to-do list where it literally looks at all of your deals, how quickly customers are responding, how often they're viewing your website, how often they're viewing your content, and it makes a task list of deals you should prioritize based on their buying signals. And so it tells you where to focus because you don't have time to like take in all of that data. You might think this is the best deal, but if you look at the data points, they might be telling you something different. And so all that to say is there's so much you're missing if you're just working out of a vanilla Salesforce instance.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said. And I agree with a lot. I do think HubSpot has like some limits in terms of like some of the scalability and stuff, but I do agree that it's just fresher, more usable. It's like cleaner. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit disappointed that Salesforce is like what it is because in many ways they invented SaaS.
They did,
when they came to the market, it was like, Mark Benioff is like a super innovator, and like when they came to market, I don't know if you remember, they had this like no software logo that they invented because the systems before Salesforce, you had to install the software on your machine and like maybe buy the next update, and they invented this like software as a service. Yeah. So huge innovation, but it quickly became like this huge monster, and like, it is difficult to customize, difficult to use, and I really don't know why. It's a mystery to me. Like we work, like Scalestack works, so like a lot of people say, oh, like Salesforce is my source of truth. No, so that's where all of my data is stored. And I do think that there is a space for Salesforce to become, a data cloud for sales and marketing. But like, even on that, like it doesn't clean the data, doesn't make it better. Like it just sits there. And then like, when you try to access it, it's not so easy. And when you do so, like the data, it's, old, stale, it doesn't connect like to other tools and data sources that you have. So it is a mystery. It's another, like one of those things like, why we have bad software in companies, basically.
Yeah. I think the best way to evaluate it too is like if your sales team is still choosing an Excel spreadsheet over your CRM, then your CRM is a problem. And that's how you know. And if they're not, then it's doing something right.
I think that's a great benchmark. Yes. And we do see even in enterprise customers, reps, because we do like studies on how like they're using the CRM and what they need in terms of the data that we provide, etc. A lot of reps are still using Google Sheets. Now they moved from Excel to Google Sheets.
Yeah.
That was the change.
Right.
So that they can easily share like the content, but it's their own spreadsheet. And maybe when they leave, all of that data that they have like carefully curated from the CRM with the other data sources gets lost. The company doesn't own it. So the entire purpose of the data is such a high priority asset for the company goes away. I think it's a great benchmark to say, is it working? If they're using spreadsheet, most likely it's not. So let's put that tagline there. So let's switch to AI, because as we said earlier, like it seems that AI is such a radical innovation that will change everything. And there was a blog, I think, that I read from Andreessen Horowitz, the investor, that like said, that of a Salesforce, like playing on the drama play, and it's because AI will completely change all of the existing workflows. You are working in, like in AI SDRs and tools. What excites you right now in using AI? Maybe let's start from like your own personal use of AI and then move on to products that people can actually buy in order to sell better.
So personally, I love it for research and just being able to like consolidate data information quickly. And that's what I use. I use ChatGPT every day. I talk to it like it's my friend, like all the time, and it still blows my mind.
Have you asked them what do they know about you? You can do
I should. I'm kind of afraid. Like my search history is all over the board. Like, what's your assumption of me?
Yeah, you should ask them.
We should all be having chats with AI daily, I think. Within reason, there's a lot that we can learn from it. But on the business side, right? So my obsession for the longest time was automation. Like, how can you automate business processes and tasks and all of that? And now we're kind of starting to weave artificial intelligence into that, but a lot of people still starting to rebrand automation as AI, But what I will say is I love it for like researching prospects, and I've seen tools that will pull information from a prospect's, like every interview, podcast, whatever they've ever been on, popping out of your browser and just saying, hey, here, you could literally direct quote them and say, I was listening to your interview on YouTube of blah, 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 and you said this, and really allowing SDRs or reps to like look like they did a ton of research and spent a ton of time researching this prospect when they didn't, just by easily accessing that information. So that's a huge one for top of funnel. And then I think, obviously I sell Sales AI product, which is AI SDRs that can call your leads and prospects, have unique conversations with them over the phone, and then book a meeting or transfer them to your sales team. So, we, for example, like 2 meetings I booked yesterday because AI SDR called through all of our closed lost deals of people that didn't move forward due to timing or budget at the time, and said, hey, is now a better time to revisit.
That's a great use case,
Sales
yes.
AI.
That's something that you always push down the priority list. Oh yes, I need to go through the close lost.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because it's so tedious, and 75% of the time they're gonna be like, no. So it was nice to just have my phone buzz, pick it up, and be like, David, you just talked to one of our AI SDRs. What's up? I'm pulling them up in HubSpot real fast.
Does it use your voice? Does
No.
it use your voice? Okay.
No. We use we have like 16 different voice options that they use, and so they've so it just kind of hand delivering me people that are ready to re-engage, which is nice, and me not having to spend an hour on the phone, calling those people. So that's great. And then from like a day-to-day perspective, I think consolidating information. So after you have a demo, the ability to have that AI note taker that consolidates everything that was discussed, writes down the summary of the call, the next steps, the action items that was assigned to everybody. That email would take a rep 20 minutes, maybe more, to put together after a demo, and now they can just click a button. It's immediately syncing to the CRM, the notes are there, and it's going to go out to an email on the customer. And everybody has access to that. And that's just a huge time saver more than anything. And it's important to, the follow-up process.
Really great breakdown. Let's start from the top. Research, super important. And I don't think it's just like to show that like you've done the research. I think it's actually because if you have like an agent, let's say, do that research and like busy work and manual work of like analyzing tons of different data, and then like only distills like what's really important. If you are a good rep, obviously you're gonna read through that and like really focus your attention on what you're reading and not on spending time researching that data, which is like sort of a tedious task to do, like multiple sources, website. And so research, super important. I love what you said about like differentiating automation from AI. Not everything is AI, some things are automation, but also not everything needs to be done with AI. You can just build like some automation, like connecting like different data sources or business apps with workflows, and then apply AI to the shared like workflow. And I like obviously the example of the AI that does things that we always push down in the priority list. It means that like, we don't want to put our mind and attention to it and maybe delegate this to an agent. And so what is that you think will happen? I mean, like a lot of people there are like basically two camps. No? So like the pessimistic camp. People that's like, okay, robots are going to take over the world and like do most jobs. And then there is the optimistic camp, which is like, they will augment people's capabilities, especially like, professionals. Where are you? Which camp are you? Now that like you've seen AI in action, you've used it. So like, let's say 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah.
Are you worried?
So, for my job, yeah, I mean, my job is going to be like being an account executive, doing demos for transactional products is probably largely going to change in the next couple of years, because a lot of buyers are coming to us through ads and through research and through marketplaces, referrals. And I think more and more software is being found by people more than people are finding it, unless you're selling a really complex solution and really or like enterprise. Like if you're selling enterprise, you got to go find your customer. But if you're selling to SMB or mid-market, you can run ads and your customer will come to you, right? So it is kind of shifting that model of sales being just this outbound process. I think that every person will be using AI tools every single day in their job. And I think that because of that, the company will have to hire one last headcount for every person that's using AI, in my opinion. So it will save companies a ton of money on headcount, allow them to operate more lean than they've ever operated before. And then if you think even from just looking at customer service, the amount of support you can provide from a customer service perspective, I think that's also going to change the amount of jobs that we are outsourcing to parties overseas to try to save money. Those jobs are now going to be taken by AI most likely.
And so where do you think that instead humans will continue to stay competitive, let's say?
I would say marketing, like being the face, like relatability, connecting with people through a screen is still gonna have a lot of weight. And I also think, people will still be involved in demos and negotiations to a point, but that's going to go further up market into mid-market and enterprise and less in SMB, or if you're selling a product that's direct to consumer, that's very transactional and quick. And so I think it's just the humans now are going to shift upwards to more complex tasks where AI is going to be able to handle, at least right now, more of the repetitive things that don't require as much thought until it's more mature. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think about that? I'd be interested in your perspective.
I like that you said marketing, because I do think that even in your example, like shifting from like a salesperson trying to do all of those like cold calls and outbound emails and stuff to, hey, let me start, like producing content. I mean, that's not how you thought, but you thought like, how can I differentiate myself and be noticed without doing like what everybody else seems to be doing that, actually is reducing, the returns. So I think marketing is going to be very interesting. Also applied to the B2B world. I read like a blog the other day and said like, if we had given B2B marketeers the Nike brand, instead of saying just do it, which has been like their super successful slogan, of course,
yeah.
They say Nike has like 42% better shoes than like the next competitor. Yeah. And like, talk about all the features and blurry the message with a lot of details versus just do it. So I think that like selling is changing, and I think you have to really speak to the buyer, and that will require like a lot of innovation in like the personalization of the message and like talking to things that people really care in a way that like, is aligned with them. And so it would be like, can we do like micro Nikes slogans for everyone that we talk to? Because I mean, when you talk to customers, like, especially like we mostly sell to enterprises, no?
Yeah.
I always have to tweak the message. like depending on what I hear, depending on like what the customer is saying, what their like priorities are. And granted, our product is not like, SMBs or like, B2C, but it's like mostly mid-market and up. But adapting the messaging to what I'm hearing is very important. And so micro-targeting, micro-messaging, micro-branding almost is going to become more and more important. So I think marketing is a huge opportunity where in sales, we've always taught marketing, a little bit poo-pooing. But I think it's going to come back in many ways and become very important.
Yeah.
And then I think like looking at the data, like using the data, what we were saying before, like, you want the agents to do the research, but then you want to think through the data. So actually all the time that we used to spend like researching, now it's just like studying that data and applying it to what we know. But we'll see. I think that there is a lot of things that we don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of unknowns. And the next couple of years would be very interesting. I mean, I started my career earlier than you, but I started when mobile was exploding, mobile phones. And I was in consulting back then, and we were telling our customers, oh, we'll do everything on our phones, watch movies and have video calls. And 20 years ago, that wasn't, fitting our brains, because we had really silly phones. And this is what's happened, and even more. And yet, it's just another tool. Yes, we cannot live without our phones, but we continue to be humans. We continue to value personal connection. So we'll see. I'm curious as you are. There is a potential pretty disruptive, pessimistic option here.
Yeah.
I think that personally we're working on AI that we want to delegate all the busy work that people don't want to do. So and that's promising, no? Because if we augment humans, that's interesting for us, for me.
Yeah. I think we're actually in the worst time right now because we're in this transition where LinkedIn messaging worked really well in COVID, and then everybody started doing it. And then, because everybody went remote, and so I was like, how am I going to get a meeting? And then, then everybody started using email sequences, automated email sequences for prospecting, and just sequencing general automated emails out to thousands of people. And then everybody got sequenced to death. And now no one will respond to a general email anymore because it's not personalized enough. And so then we try to do domain stacking. How can we send out 200,000 emails every single day so that somebody will reply? And so it's and now it's people are starting to do content more, and they're starting to do influencer partnerships. They're trying to attract people instead of go out to people. And I think that's sort of the shift that people are trying to figure out right now, is how do I attract people? Or how do I attract the C-suite even? Are conferences still effective as they used to be 15 years ago before the internet? There's a lot of different things that people are just trying to completely change because a lot of the old stuff isn't working the way it used to.
100%. And I mean, this is Scalestack. I've been building it from scratch, and we raise money, and the old book for startup is really outdated. I mean, downloading a white paper, which was normal a couple of years ago. Forget it. Nobody will download that white paper, and if they do, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But what we see working is for instance, small events. And again, dinners and a round table, better if in person, so that people connect to one another. And at the end of the day, people buy from people they like. So that will always stay true. In many ways, even if that liking is about a messaging delivered maybe electronically or through an AI, but that messaging needs to resonate. I always say that in today's world, you cannot just assume that if you have a great product, it will sell itself. I think you need to innovate even in your go-to market. So how do you bring that to market needs to be different. and resonate with people.
Yeah, it's funny that not funny that you talk about events. I like that you're talking about events because it's enterprise, it's valuable, and SMB it's really not as much the money you spend, right? So, but one of my connections sells a really expensive, payroll software, and all they do is in-person drops of gifts, custom gifts, or gifts for clients, and then inviting them to events, and they're targeting that C-suite. And that's the only way to get through the noise, because it's not going to be the general email. It's not going to be, it could be the cold call that follows up on the gift or whatever else. But it's it's not enough just to email somebody anymore. You really do have to stand out above the rest and make somebody feel special. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is buyers just want to feel special. They want to feel like they're important and that they're not just a number to you. And that's how you kind of get past or get the response from them.
Make the audience the hero again. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Make them feel heard, and that they are at the center of the story. And talking about the brand, I'm curious about your brand. I think, I've seen and read some of the content, it's cool, it's smart, it's also very direct and apologetic. Are you thinking about these things, or it's just you and just or are you planning this more carefully now that you have a bigger audience? And I'm asking this because maybe when you have a bigger audience, you need to think this through more, or no, you're just...
No, I don't really think through or plan.
That's great.
I plan my content. I create content based on what's happening in my day-to-day and what sparks an idea, and in that moment I quick film it, and then I'll edit it later in my bed when I'm just after work. I'll just be sitting there snipping, cutting out all my filler words and my ums and my uhs. But so to answer your question, but all I say is if I'm thinking about this, then there's got to be 10,000, 20,000, whatever sales reps that are thinking about this same thing, or maybe they want to learn how to do this. I still talk to people every week that don't know how to get a hold of a prospect. I'm what do you mean? I'm you can get a cell phone number of anybody you want at any time. For anybody that's on LinkedIn, you can get their cell phone number. And they're what? And I'm yeah. I'm here are 3 different tools that you can use to get their cell phone number and their email, and just call them. And they're oh my gosh. It's just there are things that still haven't made it to the masses yet. And there's still tools that nobody knew about. And even I didn't know about 6 years ago. I was going on fastpeoplesearch.com to find, contact information. This is, so... I figure somebody's got to get value from it, and I don't know what it is. I just love to teach, and if I can get in front of a camera and teach at scale and help somebody, I haven't I've monetized it here and there. I'll do brand deals, I'll do partnerships with companies that I like that have tools that I found valuable and that I've gotten to use, and then I can see the value in. And that's really how I think about it. It's not really calculated necessarily. It's just, hey, this is what I'm finding valuable at the moment. Hope you can relate.
That's that's great, and that's what I think about living in New York. I'm Italian. I've been living here for 15 plus years, and what I tell people is always, whatever you like to do, there is something community, a little get together, a little meetup in New York City with many people that love exactly what you like to do. And I think that intuition is very good. When you say if I'm thinking about this, other people will wonder about this, because it's part of human curiosity, and I think it shows in your content that it's very you. So McKenna, this was great. I really enjoyed it. It was lively, and maybe I have 2 questions for you, before we go away. One is what is the most underrated skill that every seller should master today?
I would say it's genuinely building trust with the prospect in front of you. I think a lot of people, you can see through the BS. You can see through the fake.
Right.
And just the ability to really, really connect with the person that you're in front of, really try to understand them, and get them to tell you really what they're thinking, like really what their pain is and really what their objections are. Instead of putting this wall up of like, oh, this is a salesperson, I'm this, like I've got to hold my cards, they're going to hold their cards. Like if you can get through the wall and just by being super, super genuine, that will take you so far.
Love it. This is a great advice and something that it's easy to forget. I think in the business world, we think that we need to behave in a certain way or like, as you said, like play the roles, and instead it's not. And maybe the last question is about like a bad sales advice that you've seen out there. I don't know if you like track, other people that like produce content in sales like you, and you say, this is terrible advice, but like without naming names, or if you want to name names, I don't care. Like what you've seen, you just gave like a great sales advice, and I hope that people will implement it. What is a bad sales advice that you've heard lately?
I don't think you can bully somebody into buying. Maybe every once in a while, but I don't think bullying people into buying is worth it or good advice. And I think there are certain really aggressive sales trainers out there that will just be like, and come back with this and then come back with this and just wear them down until and maybe you'll get a few wins through that, but I don't think that's the best way to do it.
100%. Yeah, like those hardcore follow-ups. Hey, we haven't done this, we haven't done that, we should do this, we should do that. Like, I always say, like, if you ask for something, give. If you want to get something, you have to give something. It's always like, a mutual like commitment that needs to happen in order to make that sale.
Yeah.
McKenna, thanks again. This was great. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and until next time, stay curious. Ciao.